Welcome back to Brunch with Brooke and Bryn. This is exciting.
Woohoo!
Woohoo! Second episode. It's kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
So, Bryn, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. But
Okay.
also, it's been very busy.
Mm.
Last episode, I said that it had been 3 weeks since we came up with the idea. I calculated it today. It had been 2 weeks. Like,
Ooh.
from idea to making our first episode, and I'm not sure how we did that.
Oh my gosh.
Isn't that weird?
That's amazing.
And it'll be 3 weeks tomorrow. So, in the space of 3 weeks, we've gotten all the equipment and recorded 2 episodes. I don't know how we did that. So, good work, us. How are you doing, Brooke?
Good, I think. When you mentioned, things have just been really, really busy, I found myself nodding my head. More aggressively in my head. However, it's been a lot of different things happening all at once for the past few weeks with grad school and my work, and I have 2 jobs and all that, and then it's been a chaotic past week. Now I feel like things are getting into a more calm space, and I really like that feeling, not gonna lie.
Lots of good things, but all at once. All right, well, this is our first real episode. We actually have a topic today, and that topic is happiness.
Yeah.
The thing we're all wondering about.
What we hope for this episode is that it brings to light some of the... I want to be careful with how I say this, right? Because it is a valuable, wonderful thing to pursue a whole life, and happiness isn't inherently a bad thing. Like, we all want to be happy. Right. How can I be happy? I feel like that's something I ask myself pretty often. I think that's a normal experience for people. What we're hoping to do is to really dive in and kind of pull apart, what does it mean to be happy? What is the definition of happiness? What are the different roads to happiness? Like, just to really try and understand it better and look at, some of the myths, because there are myths out there, or some social scripts, if you will, or expectations, I think, that's often put upon us of, no, this is the only way you can be happy, or this is what it should be. And should, even as a word itself, is a little problematic, right? Because there's pressure there, and it doesn't always open it up to the range of the human experience, right? Because you have the highs and you have the lows, and that's just normal. That's a normal part of living life. So we're hoping to dive in and talk about that today. Okay.
Yeah.
So, just to get the ball rolling, we're going to go ahead and break this up into a few sections. So just so that you know where we're going with this, we're going to talk about problematic ways to talk about happiness. And with that, we'll explore the myths, right? And different ways that shows up in our lives. And then we're going to transition to the different ways happiness is described. Like, we're going to pull apart the words and the language we use, which I'm pretty excited for. I get excited about words. There's a lot of fun stuff there. And then we're going to go ahead and do a big section on how to pursue happiness in an intentional, healthy way, because we want it to be the hopeful ending piece of, okay, well, here are our thoughts on it, and it might resonate with you. You might strongly agree with some things. At other parts, you might disagree. And maybe this is just a good thinking exercise for you. And I'm glad you're here plugging along with us, willing to sit and to join. And we're going to talk about research behind it and just how to be intentional with creating the life that you love and you want to live. Yeah.
Awesome. Let's do it. Okay, so to start, we're going to talk about 3 myths about happiness. The first one, which I think is the one that people struggle with the most because of how we talk about it in our society, is you cannot choose happiness. Happiness is not a choice. Go take down your vinyl stickers on your wall. You can't just choose happy. It's not a choice. But you can influence your happiness. What I mean when I say you can't choose happiness is a feeling, and feelings are biological reactions to events and thoughts, and you can't choose a chemical or biological reaction. It's just something that happens, right?
Yeah. So with the whole choose happiness mantra that is often spread throughout our culture, and to be fair, I'm speaking to my experience as a white educated woman who's never had to live in extreme poverty, and I also am an English speaker. I know Spanish, however, English is my native tongue, and I've grown up in the United States. So it might be different depending on where you've lived and also your social cultural location, if that makes sense. And therefore you can take and leave what I'm about to say. I feel like a lot of times with the mantra choose happiness, it's not very holistic for mental health, for example, because that's a really big thing that a lot of us experience in life. And it's very unfair to keep saying, oh, if you just choose to be happy, your depression's going to stop. Your anxiety is going to go away. You're not going to keep having these mood fluctuations, right? Depending on where you find yourself with your mental health journey. And if we're continuously saying, no, choose happiness, I think there's value in sharing the idea that you have a choice at all times throughout your day. And it's through your choices that you can facilitate the road to your happiness. You can facilitate and pursue things that are more likely to help you feel happiness or a sense of satisfaction, or like all the other things, right, that can help with your overall mental and emotional experience and well-being in general. And I think just to prescribe, no, choose happiness to people who are having a hard time or just trying to get through the day, like that's very unfair, and it's not realistic either.
That brings up a really good point. We can't choose happiness. We can't choose that feeling. We can't sit there and just be like, okay, I'm going to be happy now. That's not how it works. But you can make choices that will likely lead to happiness. And you can try and direct your thought patterns and make life choices that are likely going to create a happy life.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you can choose happiness, but you can't choose happiness.
Yeah.
You know?
It's more complex than that, which...
Right.
It's kind of interesting to think about, because I think I was taught and shown growing up that happiness is a really simple thing. And sometimes I think happiness can be. Yeah. However, in many ways, it's also complex. Like, there are many pieces to happiness. And yeah, I do feel happy when I've cleaned my house, because for me, I really like it when things are clean. And so there's kind of this feeling of, oh, I feel good. And that can potentially contribute to my happiness. Or I love painting. So whenever I paint something, I kind of get into this state of flow and I'm feeling really happy and just in tune with myself. And that also is very nice. However, I'm actively pursuing something that I love. And that's kind of creating the byproduct of happiness, I guess.
Happiness is a byproduct and not a choice. But it's a byproduct of your choices.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. I like that a lot, Bren. It's a byproduct of our choices. Yeah.
Number 2. The myth is you should be happy all the time.
All the time.
All the time.
24 hours a day, people. 365 days in a year. All the time.
All the time. I think this is very prominent in America. I think we have a very happiness-centric society. We're very focused on happiness. Which might not be a bad thing. I don't know. You judge that. But it is not normal to be happy all the time, because the human journey is full of ups and downs.
The idea of you should be happy all the time, again, should's not a very helpful word. And that can put a lot of pressure, like, oh, I should do this, I should do that. And I feel like I can slip into this mindset of I'm beating myself up because I'm not where I want to be yet. And instead of getting stuck in that mindset or that myth about happiness, I think it's really empowering to recognize yeah, in my life, I'm going to have the highs. Sometimes they're going to be really, really high highs, and it's going to feel great. Like, there's going to be so much happiness, joy, excitement. They're like, oh, I'm living my best life. Woo. And then there are going to be moments when you experience the lowest of the lows. And that's just part of life. And truthfully, I don't think I'd rather have it be a world where I can experience the lows or the highs, because then I wouldn't be able to appreciate the good things or the tender mercies or the people in my life who do make such a big difference. Like,
right.
It kind of eliminates the other things.
It's part of the fullness of life. It's part of the human experience.
That's a good way to describe it.
To experience everything rather than only one emotion. I think some people may struggle with the you should not be happy all the time, because they may look at it and be like, you need to celebrate life, like have a more positive attitude. And this is a difference between happiness and optimism. Because optimism is your outlook on life, and happiness is your internal feelings, right? And so, like we said, you can't just choose to be happy all the time, but you can choose to be optimistic all the time.
Hey, there we go. It's the and, right?
It's the and.
No, I really love that, Bren. Seriously, because I feel like, for me, it's empowering to know that I do have a choice, right? And I can always choose my mindset. And honestly, it can be really cathartic to have those moments to myself when I allow myself to cry or to feel the hard things, or like, that was a really sucky day, or I felt anxious, embarrassed, like whatever it was that maybe was a harder emotion, right? I'm letting myself feel it. And sometimes when I do give myself a good cry, it's very cathartic. And that's my experience, right? And even with the hard things, or if I'm in the lowest of lows, I can always choose my mindset, like to hold space for myself and have a big heart, and also to have the hope of I'm okay. And I think things will get better.
Yeah.
I hope things will get better.
Even in your sadness, you have an optimistic attitude, right? Yeah. And some people see that as, even in your sadness, you have happiness, but really a better word for it is probably optimism or a positive attitude, whatever you want to call it. And so if you're someone that kind of struggles with this, I think for a lot of people it's because they get happiness and optimism confused, which, I mean, our society at large does it all the time, so not blaming, but it's also something to be aware of.
I agree. And I think a lot of society right now is talking about toxic positivity. I hear that word being thrown around a lot. And I don't think it's a bad thing to be positive. And again, it goes back to the whole mindset piece. And it's just important to be intentional with it all. You know what I mean? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I had thought about toxic positivity because I think it's an important thing to talk about in this episode. For those of you that don't know what toxic positivity is, it's when you're so stuck on being positive all the time that you can't acknowledge bad or sad or hard things in life.
It's kind of like blinders. You put blinders on.
It's like I can only see good things and nothing else. And that's problematic because it makes it so you can't always process difficult things. And it makes it so if someone comes to you and they're like, I'm having a hard time, and you're just like, well, you just need to have a better attitude about it. That's not very helpful.
Ouch.
You need to, there's times that you need to mourn with people, and you need, and that's the best thing you can do for them at the time. And it's really, it's
even
very situational.
I don't know what to say right now. I can't imagine what you're going through.
And I know a lot of families that have so much toxic positivity that nothing bad can ever be said. Nothing negative can ever be said. And I understand we don't want to be complaining all the time. We don't want to be overly negative. But I think we can acknowledge this sucks and there's also good things happening. Brooke talks about this all the time, replacing but with and. And I think that's very powerful, especially with toxic positivity. Use this sucks and blank.
Thank you. That felt really nice. Yeah, the power of and.
A lot of my ideas for this point, you don't need to be happy all the time, comes from this great book, Bittersweet by Cain. her probably more famous book is Quiet, but this is her second book. And would highly recommend if this is a topic you're interested in. And in our society, we often see melancholy as being a bad thing. She calls it being bittersweet. And
love that so much.
and like we often categorize melancholy as depression. Like, if you're anything below neutral, then you're depressed, right? And I think we need to have a more balanced view of it, where being melancholy sometimes is okay. And I think people just have natural set points. Some people have more melancholy personalities, and they're going to be on the more negative emotion side, but you can still have a positive attitude even if you are melancholy. You can do both. But then you can also be someone that's more naturally on the happy side. And it's normal to have both of those. I've found, for me, that I am generally on the happier side, but I do have days that are pretty melancholy. And it's not a bad thing. I just feel lower energy, but it's also a very creative state for me, and I'm very connected to the human spirit. I write a lot of my very best poetry when I am melancholy, which she talks about in the book a lot, that it's a very creative state. So it's not, being melancholy isn't necessarily a bad thing. So maybe think about in your life, what times have you thought, oh, I'm really sad, like I'm feeling maybe a little depressed, when actually you're just feeling a little melancholy. And is feeling melancholy always bad? Not necessarily. So something to think about.
I love that. So the third myth that Bryn and I came up with is called the happily ever after myth. Originally, when we were brainstorming for this episode, we brought up the idea of a lot of times in media, so movies, TV shows, even books, and also social media, there's this idea of a happily ever after, like this is the end and you never have to worry about stuff or real life. You can just be in this bubble in a way of, the two love interests have kissed, they're good, they're fine, the story ends. Or the person got the dream job they always wanted, they're moving on in their life, there's great success, that's the end of the story. And all these other pieces, and that's not,
you never see part two.
You know,
like, it's very rare for a movie or a book to cover an entire life. There are some books that do it. Anne of Green Gables covers like her whole life, right? I've not read
Anne
it,
of Green Gables,
but I know that Brooke really likes it.
I do.
So there are some books, but most of them, and there are movies that address the complexity of the good and the bad, but most of them, especially kids movies, will just like, and it's all good in the end, and everything's good after that.
Woohoo!
And I think it can really give us this idea that should happen in our real life. Like, obviously we know that's not true, but it's hard to separate that when we see it so much. And it's this idea of, you are never going to arrive at a point that you don't have problems anymore. And this is something I actually really struggled with for a while. I've always had this idea that, like, sometime, probably in my 40s, maybe 50s, I would get to a point that, like, everything would be good for the rest of my life. I'd figure everything out.
Take me there, please.
And I really believed that. But now I realize I'm never going to get to a point in my life like that. Even if I had a 10-year span where everything was so good, which is really unlikely to happen, I would eventually, like, get old, or my spouse would die, or my kids would get sick. Like, something, I'm never going to get to a point that the rest of my life is perfect.
Yeah. Because that's, I mean, life changes. Yeah. And it's not ever going to be the perfect idea we have in our head. And it's so good to look forward to things and to get excited and to have meaningful goals. And there's no such thing as a perfect future, or this is the end, or you have arrived.
And I think you can start fully living when you accept that, because you don't have this attitude that I'm going to fully live once everything in my life is good. You can fully live when things are bad, and when they're good, and when they're just okay.
I love that. Say it one more time.
When they're good, and when they're bad, and when they're just okay, you can fully live during all of it.
The range.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay, shall we?
Yeah. One thing I've thought about a lot is there's lots of words we use to describe happiness, but it can be confusing because we often use them interchangeably. So it's hard to tell what they actually mean. And so it's actually easy to get negative or unhealthy views on happiness because we're using the wrong words. So we wanted to talk about a few of the words to describe happiness, and maybe in your conversations you can try and use happiness more accurately, or just even when other people are talking, you can be like, okay, they said that, what are they actually saying? What are they actually describing? Are they describing satisfaction or pleasure or joy or happiness? I think it can just be a useful mental tool to help you rewrite what happiness is.
Yeah. And when you open your eyes to that, you'll see it a lot more. It's pretty interesting. Like, even as we were prepping for this episode on happiness, I saw a lot more. I heard a lot more in this past week where I was like, interesting. Okay, good intentions and a really good goal. However, that's not quite happiness. Or, like, maybe that's not the most healthy way of approaching it all. So I think it is really powerful to take a step back and think about the words we're using or how other people are describing it, and checking to understand, well, what's the meaning I'm putting into this? Or what's the meaning behind this person's happiness when they share, or the activity that they're doing, right? Yeah. So some of the ones that we came up with, we have satisfaction, which when I think about it, it's kind of like happiness from a job well done, or I did it. Yeah. I'm satisfied by that. Like, I'm kind of like a passing moment of completeness, I guess.
Yeah. I love that. A passing moment of completeness. Where you did what you could, and even if things didn't work out perfectly, you're like, I did my best. Like, I'm complete in this moment, or part of me is complete in this moment.
Yeah. And that even you could go back and, like, I take great satisfaction in knowing that I finished my undergraduate honors thesis because it took so much effort and time on my part. It was a labor of love for sure. It took a year for me to research, and defend, publish it all. And even now I look back with great satisfaction that I did that. And in some ways it does also bring me happiness, which is interesting.
Yeah. I see it as happiness from a passing moment of completeness, or happiness from. So it's almost like these are all things that fall under happiness. So they're all like parts of happiness. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe with some overlap too.
Yeah,
like,
and all the words have some overlap, but their mother is happiness.
Yeah. The mother. Happiness is the mother. The motherland.
Yes, the mother of the rest of these words.
Yeah.
The next word is contentment that we thought of.
Which I feel like contentment, satisfaction, and peace have a lot of similar pieces.
Yeah.
However, contentment is more about happiness from just where you're at, what you've been able to.
It's almost like a gratitude of life, for life.
Yeah.
A gratitude for where you're at.
Yeah, for your growth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like
and
that.
happiness can be a byproduct of those pieces. Yeah. Then we have pleasure.
Yeah, and pleasure I define as happiness from sensual experiences, so it's very sensory. So it's eating a delicious sandwich or drinking refreshing water.
I see what you did there.
As Brooke drinks her water. It could be getting massage.
Man. Yeah. Massages are nice.
Those are all pleasures, and it's happiness that comes from a sensory pleasure.
Yeah, or even feeling sunshine on your skin.
Yeah, listening to music you love.
Yeah. So I like that breakdown of it. And then we also have, and here are our last two. We have joy and we have peace. Joy is an interesting one when it comes to happiness.
Yeah, I see joy as kind of an overarching happiness that spans a lifetime.
Yeah, I think it's a more profound
Right. And I think joy, in my opinion, comes from optimism. So if you're optimistic about life, you're probably going to have a greater joy. Joy is also a happiness that comes from years of work. So when I think joy, one of the things I think is like a mother or a father that are with their child that's getting married. And they're like, I have such joy that this turned out well and that I have this great child and they met this great person. Like, to me, that is joy. And it's something that stretches back and forward.
Oh,
it's overarching.
I love that. It's stretching back and forward. Yeah. With that, I want to add too, I think joy is very much a deeper feeling of happiness in some ways.
Yeah.
And yeah, it does stretch. Like, I can go back to the moments that did bring me great joy. And I also noticed that I felt grateful. I felt wonder. I felt awe. I felt peace, contentment. Like, it's interesting how the emotions can kind of overlap. And definitely, for me at least with joy, it's that deeper, more profound experience that is from both the past and present and the future. Like, it can last.
A profound happiness. I like that.
There we go. Joy. Profound happiness.
And then our last one is peace. To me, peace is kind of the thing that you should pursue. Don't pursue happiness, pursue peace. And I'll tell you why. I have this friend, she's from China. They see things from a different perspective, just like all cultures do, right? And I think it's really interesting. She talked about when she would come home from school, she did really well on tests. She'd give the test to her parents. She'd be like, look how well I did. And they'd be like, this is awesome. Like, we're so proud of you. And also, you might not do very good next time. And that's okay. Which sounds kind of harsh, but it's seeing the ups and downs of life as normal.
Yeah.
It's very validating that, like, you don't always have to get 100% on your tests. Like, sometimes you'll fail, but it's about making choices that are leading to peace. So she said they focus on peace of mind much more than they do happiness.
Ooh.
And so peace of mind to me is living within your values. So figuring out what your values are and choosing to live within them is going to create a peace that will transcend anything else.
That's good. That's really cool.
Thanks. And I just think that's a helpful perspective, and it's good to pursue peace, not happiness. And then even the good and bad, anything that goes wrong, as long as you're living in your values, you're going to be able to feel that you lived the best life you could. And that brings joy.
Brings peace of mind too.
Yeah.
I love that.
And the second part of this is, I mean, this isn't really connected to peace, but I guess to wrap up this section, what I feel like you should focus on instead of happiness, because like we've talked about, there can be problems with focusing just on happiness, because it's a feeling. Focusing so much on a feeling that can come and go isn't a very healthy way to live your life, right? And so instead, focusing on having peace of mind and living fully. And so that's just being present, feeling the things you feel, being engaged in life, and being mindful. All of those things are living fully. And I think peace paired with living fully is a very powerful recipe for living a holistic life.
I agree with that. And I think that's very beautiful and a wonderful way to wrap up this section. So thank you, Bren.
You're welcome.
Okay. Shall we do the next part?
Yeah.
We're going to dive into the second section.
How to pursue happiness in an intentional, healthy way.
And we were intentional about writing that, weren't we?
We were.
Yeah. There are a couple things that we do know about happiness. There's been a lot of great research in the past couple of decades about it and the components that can help us live a full life, what Bryn was talking about, and pursue ways that can facilitate our happiness and our well-being. So there's this really incredible book. It's called The How of Happiness by, I believe, Sonja, I'm going to butcher the last name, Lyubomirsky.
That was pretty good.
Okay. Made it.
7 out of 10.
Oh, great. Okay. Okay. I'm satisfied with that. Thank you. So there's a lot of great research in that book, and it talks about how we can be happy and how happiness works, how it can show up in our lives. And a lot of research that has been done is that there are 3 major pieces to happiness. There's kind of a pie chart they made and put into the book. And the question they wanted to answer was, what determines happiness? Something very interesting we find, about 50% of what determines happiness is our biology and our genetics. So kind of the genetic set point that you were talking about earlier. And that can include the mental health experience. 40% is intentional activity. That's nice, like our choices.
So that's what you can do about your happiness. You essentially have 40% control.
Yeah. Things you pursue, what you get involved with, the type of people you hang out with, right? And then 10% is because of life circumstances, like just the surprising things that happen we can't control. It's just part of the human experience, right? So we have biology and genetics making up the biggest percentage, 50%. Then we have life circumstances as 10%, and then we have 40% of intentional activity.
Which I find actually kind of hopeful, because we give life circumstances way more credit than they deserve, right?
Yeah, we blow it up.
It's always like, when I do this, then I'm going to be happy. And like, if I didn't have this going on in my life, then I would be happy. But really, a lot of it is your biology, which you don't have a ton of control over. And it's like I talked about before, some people naturally have more melancholy personalities, which I don't think we should necessarily see as a bad thing. So maybe you have a little bit less of that pie chart, and of course that could reach into depression, but maybe you're just more melancholy, and that's okay, right?
Yeah.
And then we can control 40% of our happiness, which is actually a lot.
It's exciting. You can control 40%, right? So what do you want to do with that 40%? Within that piece of the pie chart, what are you going to do to facilitate your happiness?
Yeah, and I think one of the discouraging things about this finding could be, maybe you're like, I think I'm one of the people that their genetics are not allowing them to have as much happiness. And I could see that being pretty depressing.
Yeah, heavy.
Yeah, but as I was thinking about it, I was like, this is why focusing too much on happiness can be a bad thing. So instead, focusing on peace of mind and living fully, and then of course doing as much with that part, the 40% you can control, I think in a lot of ways you can live a very full life, even if it doesn't fit a traditional, I'm just happy all the time and it's great and everything's good, you know?
It's the both.
Right.
It's the and.
So we're now going to talk about the PERMA model.
Oh, yes.
Which was developed by Martin Seligman. Is that how you say it?
Yeah.
Seligman? Yeah. Okay. And the PERMA model is essentially, it's guidelines to a life well lived. Is that a good way to say it?
I love that. It's kind of like there are domains of well-being, and how can we take care of those pieces? And then happiness comes as a byproduct.
Yeah, happiness is often a byproduct of this, but like we were saying, these are things, the part of the pie chart that you can control, these are the things in that pie chart. The PERMA model, another way to say it, is it's a way to have a great life, and happiness is a likely result.
I love that. So a big piece here that we really wanted to touch on, and if there's one thing you get from me in this podcast, you might hear this a lot. If there's only one thing you learn from Brooke, I hope it's this. Have a big heart for yourself. That's really important. How often do we show up for other people and have a big heart for them? Showing compassion, showing kindness, showing thoughtfulness, fill in the blank, right? How often do we show up with a big heart for ourselves? Self-compassion is a really big piece of living a full life, and that contributes in a large part to having peace of mind and even being on the road of life and hoping for happiness. Like, have a big heart for yourself just as you go through the highs and the lows. And if your kids aren't listening to you, or maybe you haven't gotten the job promotion you want, or you haven't finished this really stressful thing, right? Like, as you're going through the difficult things, or as you're pursuing your hobbies, as you're trying to figure out who you are, your identity, have a big heart for yourself. I think that's a really central piece to my happiness and my well-being. And it's just something that we want to offer to all of you, that you can, regardless of your circumstances, yes, you can choose optimism, and you can also choose to have a big heart for yourself. And that's pretty important. Okay, so the PERMA model, right?
Yeah, the PERMA model, it's an acronym. We're going to go through each letter and talk about it. So, like we said, it's a model for how to have a great life, and happiness is a likely result.
Okay. Well, PERMA, P, positive emotion.
And that is essentially do things that help you feel positive emotions. That can be things like Brooke loves to paint, like she said, and that creates positive emotion, or exercise, or being with people you love, like anything that creates positive emotion.
And you really love being outside, rock climbing, hiking, backpacking.
Yeah, those things create positive emotions for me. And so incorporating those into your life, and like we said, you can't choose happiness, but you can do things that you know help you feel more positive emotions, right?
That gives you the oxytocin, blah blah blah. That gives you the oxytocin and the dopamine.
That's right.
Work with your brain. It's great.
One really cool way that I found recently to cultivate positive emotions is from this book, The Wisdom of Yoga by Stephen Cope. If you are into yoga, you may not know this, but there's 8 limbs of yoga, and yoga, the exercise, is just one part of it, but yoga's like a whole lifestyle, and it's actually really fascinating.
There's a whole culture to it.
Yeah, it's a whole philosophy of living. And it talks a lot about meditation in this book. And I always saw meditation as you sit and you focus on clearing all thoughts out of your head, and you just focus on your breathing. And it's a way to help train your consciousness, which is one of the things that it can do. But I didn't realize that there's actually lots of different types of meditation and ways you can meditate, and different goals in meditation. And one of the things that it talked about is using meditation for state cultivation. So cultivating a state of mind. So, for example, you could cultivate happiness, or you could cultivate patience, or one of the common ones is cultivate loving kindness. I think lots of people, if you've done really any meditation... Oh,
my insulin pump. So sorry. Ignore that.
If you've done any meditation at all, you've probably done loving kindness meditation at some point. It's a meditation that you think of different people and then send like love and kindness to them, essentially, which is actually very powerful. I think if you just do it once, it's okay, but if you do it lots of times to help heal relationships, it can really help you be a more loving and kind person. It's very powerful. And so I was like, I would love to do this for happiness. So I did some Googling. I was like trying to find some meditations to cultivate happiness. Didn't really find much. Maybe there's something out there. But I found some things that work for me. And so for our Patreon bonus content this week, we are making a guided happiness meditation using the techniques that I've learned that have been helpful. And a lot of the time it's like the happiest I feel in a day. It's a great way to cultivate positive emotions. The P in PERMA.
I love that. And something to keep in mind with this too, there's a principle called hedonic adaptation. Correct me on this if I'm wrong. It comes down to, as you keep doing things or trying to feel the positive emotions, sometimes we adapt to it, and it's kind of like this new set point.
Right. So for example, say for so long you've been wanting to get a new car, and you finally get this new car. You've been so excited about it. It's your favorite color. It works so well. It drives so well. You're so happy about it. And the day you get it, you're just like bursting, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the whole week you're like showing your friends, I got a new car, I'm so excited. And the whole month, and then 2 months, and then but slowly it turns into, this is just my car. Like, yeah, it's like new, but it's just my car.
It's normal for me.
Right. And so it's our tendency to adapt to circumstances, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, because it also works with negative circumstances. You lost someone you loved, your dog died, I don't know, whatever it might be. You can also adapt from that and come back to more of a set point. So it's hedonic adaptation is not necessarily a bad thing, but if we're doing things to cultivate positive emotions, it can be something that can make it more difficult, because it's like, oh, I just go on a hike every day. It's just normal. Like, you started doing it to get that positive emotion, but now it's just something that's normal for you. And so I think the cure for hedonic adaptation is gratitude. And having this attitude of, I got this new car and I've had it for 6 months now, but I'm so grateful. Look how pretty the color is. Like, look how well it drives. Like, it's so much better than my last car. Whatever it may be, always coming with an attitude of gratitude.
I definitely agree with that. And a lot of research shows too, gratitude is huge for your level of happiness and life satisfaction, and even in relationships. Like, when you actively practice gratitude, you're able to see a lot more, because I feel like you're opening yourself up to more of the highs and also recognizing the lows, like kind of going back to the bittersweet idea. With gratitude, you can hold space for that and also say, yeah, true, and I am so grateful for this thing that does bring me happiness. And that's pretty big, so I love that.
Yeah.
Okay.
All of that.
All right, E. So engagement is the next part of the PERMA model.
And there's kind of 3 different parts of this that we're going to talk about. Number 1, well, engagement, first off, is being engaged with your life, not just letting it pass by, but living very intentionally in your life. So one way is mindfulness.
Yeah, and mindfulness is amazing. I love it. And maybe it's not your jam and you haven't bought into the idea yet, and that's okay. Mindfulness is something, though, that when you're able to take a step back, ground yourself either through breathing techniques, muscle relaxation, some way for you to be mindful of the experience of your body and where you're at, that's really, really good for your overall engagement with your life.
Yeah. So the next one is flow. We could do a lot on flow, so we're just going to briefly summarize it. Flow is a state of mind where you're doing something that's hard, but not too hard, and you have that perfect in between where you become very focused. It's a very hard task that you're very good at, or at least have the skill to match it, right?
Like, it's simultaneously a challenge for you, so that it's like, oh, okay. It's not just going to be me going on autopilot and not putting in any engagement or effort with it. It's okay, it's a challenge and I'm pushing myself, and it's not so much of a challenge that it's overwhelming. Like, I can enjoy the task at hand,
right,
and also get into the state of flow, which just time slows down and you're in the zone.
Yeah, it's not overwhelming or underwhelming. It's that in between. For me, I feel flow when I rock climb because it's something that is hard, but also I have a certain mastery over that. My mind just totally is focusing on the rock in front of me, and everything else just kind of disappears. And that's flow, and it's part of engagement. And I think you can look in your life and say, in what ways can I cultivate flow, maybe on a weekly basis or something. And for some people, it's gardening. Other people, it's drawing. There's so many different, kind of any activity can be a flow activity, even talking to someone.
Yeah, absolutely. And it goes back to engaged living. Just that piece. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is our next topic, engaged living. This is my favorite one. I love engaged living.
Aw.
I'm very passionate about it. Engaged living is living aligned with your values. It's basically as simple as that.
Yeah.
It's knowing your values and then living in a way that fulfills those values. And that really goes back to the peace of mind aspect, where you always know that you're living within your values, so you have peace of mind, but you're very intentional about your life. You're not letting life just happen as it happens. I mean, obviously you only have so much control, but you figure out how you want to live and you live that way. And that's engaged living. It's very powerful for creating a fulfilling life.
Okay, so the next piece is positive relationships, which there are a lot of pieces there. So one caveat that we want to give for this element of the PERMA model is that we invite you to be intentional and aware of the difference between, okay, this is a normal relationship, there's some conflict or differences or things that we just don't agree, and abuse, there being a lack of safety, no respect, your human rights aren't being honored. So just be very careful with that, because it does show up.
Right, because it's normal to have conflict in relationships. That's just part of being a human.
Yeah.
And in our culture, there's a big thing about cutting toxic people out of your life, which is a good thing to do to an extent. I think you have to look at it and be like, this person isn't very healthy for me. They're not really adding a lot to my life, and I don't even really know them that well, and they're wanting to hang out. You can just say no. You don't have to continue that, right? But then there's also people that are very important parts of your life that you may have a higher conflict relationship with. That doesn't necessarily mean that you should cut them out of your life. For example, I have a difficult relationship with one of my close family members, and I've struggled with them for years. I had thought about cutting them out of my life at one point, but I'm so grateful I did not do that, because we've been able to get over the conflict, and we still have good and bad, right? There's still more difficult days, but I think it would have really been a tragedy if I had just been like, that person's toxic, they did this thing to me, and now we're done. Because it is such a rewarding relationship. So I think get rid of toxic people, but see if you can fix the relationship first. And it may even take years to fix that relationship if it's someone close to you. Obviously, abusive relationships are another matter. But really ask yourself, is this close person someone that I will regret later not trying to fix the relationship?
Do they bring helpful pieces? Do they make a difference in my life? Do they help me want to be a better person? Do they teach me things? It's important to think about what it not to objectify people at all or objectify relationships, just to take a step back and kind of do an inventory check, as well as, how do I feel when I'm with this person? Do I feel seen, valued, heard, respected, cared for? And again, conflict is a normal part of relationships, and I strongly believe that conflict is an opportunity for intimacy and connection. And a really big piece of happiness in this PERMA model is having positive relationships. And there have been really cool things in research, as well as just things I've seen in my own life, of when we're able to develop, maintain, and enjoy relationships with other people that are established in a lot of healthy principles, and being able to tolerate the differences and be okay with the conflict, and enjoy the person for what they do offer you, that can be really, really good. It can be helpful for your physical health, your emotional well-being, your mental, your support system and everything too. That's big.
Yeah. And I think this is an important part where if you struggle with positive relationships, maybe try getting some more conflict resolution skills, right? Some better communication skills, and be able to set boundaries and identify the people in your life that really benefit you and give you those positive emotions and are really positive relationships, and hang out with them more. And people that maybe family members or close friends that don't do that as much, you can still keep up that relationship and have a close relationship with them, but set boundaries.
Yeah,
and
maybe not seek them out as much.
Hang out with them a little bit less, and that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fine. That's great.
And sometimes just hanging out with them less can heal a relationship too, I think.
Yes, I've definitely experienced that before. Yeah.
One really cool study is the Harvard Happiness Study, which they've been doing for like 100 years now. And
so cool.
And they have studied happiness in this large group of people, and they found that the number one indicator of happiness was having good relationships. It was just by far the thing that stuck out the most, and it was really important for people's health too. Physical health. So take care of the relationships in your life.
Find your people. Get to know those around you. Give people a chance to show up for you and to build good relationships, meaningful relationships. Maybe that's the word that I would opt for rather than, I mean, positive relationships is good. I think I might lean towards the meaningful relationships.
I like that. Yeah. Meaningful relationships. Talking about meaning, that's the next one. Meaning.
You don't say. That's not intentional at all.
Meaning is having purpose in your life and meaning for your past. So in positive psychology, normally they define purpose as future oriented. What is my purpose in life? And meaning as past oriented. What is the meaning of things that have happened to me? Figuring those out for yourself, creating your own story, your own narrative. Our narratives about ourselves are very powerful.
Narratives and beliefs.
Yeah. We're going to talk about meaning a lot in one of our upcoming episodes, so we're not going to go into that a ton unless you have anything to add.
No, that was great.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel good to move on to the next piece, which is accomplishments and achievements.
One thing about accomplishments and achievement, we have a very success-based culture. It's all about the hustle, right?
Yeah. The rat race. Oh my goodness.
Which is...
It's exhausting.
Yeah,
honestly.
it's not super healthy. So I think you need to separate accomplishment and achievement from that hustle culture, right?
Well, it's like, remember to be engaged and be intentional with what you're choosing to do in your life instead of just doing something for the sake of doing something and being productive in it. It's good to be productive. It's good to pursue things that you're passionate about. And what is it that I want to leave as my legacy in some cases? And what are the things that are important to me that I want to do?
Which goes back to meaning, because it's like, what's your purpose in life? Which also goes back to engaged living. What are your values? What do you want to accomplish? And I think, like you were saying, you don't want to just accomplish things to accomplish things. You want to accomplish things that are in line with your values. Otherwise,
I like that.
We have a limited time in life, so accomplish things that are valuable to you in your life.
Yeah. Maybe worthy of our time.
Yeah, worthy of our time.
Yeah.
I think achievement and accomplishment can be difficult sometimes because in school, like we start school when, I don't know, preschool or like kindergarten, whenever you start, and it's very task oriented. It's like, okay, I'm turning in this homework assignment, I'm doing the reading, I'm doing this project. It's very much like I can check the box, check. But that can become problematic because that's the way we're trained to see accomplishment all of our life. But then you get to the real world, and that's not how a lot of accomplishment actually works.
No,
right?
Yeah, or so rarely do we get the recognition for something big or small.
Right, and our life can't be seen in grades.
Yeah, because again, people can't be put into a box.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you get into the real world, it's like, did I do good on this? I didn't get a grade, so I don't really know. Did I accomplish anything today? I don't know. I worked on this project for 8 hours, and it's a really big project, and it's going to take years for me to complete. Those are hard things because I think it can be helpful to break things into smaller accomplishments, and that can help you see that you're making progress. But a lot of things in life, a lot of the most meaningful things in life take a lot of time and aren't just check off the box and I'm done.
Yeah. And sometimes I think we get focused on the to-do list instead of the to-be list. And with accomplishments and achievements, like, sure, when success is measured, it's easier to see. Absolutely. And also, sometimes it's a really big accomplishment that I've gotten out of bed in the morning, or that I made my bed, or that I'm out on a walk, because that takes effort and that takes time. However, is that as seen as an accomplishment,
what's
an achievement?
What's an achievement for you rather than what other people would say is an achievement?
Mm-hmm.
I think a great example of this is parenthood. My sister-in-law calls it the hamster wheel of motherhood. Because it's like you're always doing the same tasks every day, right? It's like, okay, I'm cleaning up this mess, I'm feeding my baby, I'm comforting my child, I'm helping them with their homework. And that's not really stuff you like make a to-do list of, like, feed my child. Like, you don't make to-do lists for stuff like that, right?
It's of course I'm going to feed my child.
Right. Yeah. And so it's a very much more long run, and it can be hard to see the accomplishments when we're trained to see it as very task-based. And so I think changing how you see your accomplishments to what am I achieving long term? And I think if you're in a position where you're doing something like parenthood or anything that's very long term, find something in your life that you can check off, that you can have as an achievement. Maybe it's running for you. Like, I can check off that box that I did that. Or it can be drawing. Like, I finished that drawing. Check off that box. I think there can be a lot for saying I completed something rather than only having things that you complete when you die. Yeah. I'm done being a father when I die.
That's it. I'm done. I completed it.
I can finally check it.
Well, like, it's in the doing process, right? And we can experience happiness as we do pursue those goals, or also the daily more mundane tasks. And it's good to have goals that you're excited about and you hope to accomplish, and also give yourself the permission to celebrate the little victories, not just the big, maybe more life-changing accomplishments.
Love that. So that would be the end of the PERMA model, but they added a plus.
But wait, there's more. Can I get a wahoo?
Wahoo?
Wahoo!
So the plus is, I guess, extra things that it's like, yeah, those are good, but like also if you don't have these base things, it's not going to work that well. Is kind of my take on it. And so it's nutrition, exercise, sleep, and optimism. So we're going to talk about all of those briefly.
Okay.
Nutrition, feed yourself well. Eat nutritious food without getting caught up in diet culture and fads. There's a lot of lies out there about what is healthy. There's a lot of moralizing of food. Watch out for it.
Have a healthy relationship, because food it can be a social thing. It can be a way to nourish my body, to give me energy. And I think there's a really big piece here of my body isn't an ornament, it's an instrument. And I love that distinction. And nutrition is a really great way that I can do what I want to do, pursue what I'm excited about, and take care of myself and facilitate my happiness, because my body feels good. My brain is getting the nutrients it needs. My organs are functioning well. And that's something that I can be excited about as well as contented with.
Yeah. If you're looking to heal your relationship with food, I'd highly recommend the book Intuitive Eating. And that's all I'll say about that. Okay, exercise. We talked about this in our positive psychology class, right? Yeah. Exercise is really incredible. We talked about this study, which I will link. Exercise is as effective, if not more effective, than antidepressants.
Which is wild. Like, it's so cool though. Like, it's a way that we can really take care of our bodies and our brain.
Yeah, and I think I have two thoughts here. One, it's easy to say to someone, oh, well, like, you should just exercise and then you wouldn't be depressed anymore, right? And that's very invalidating and not very understanding of the experience of depression. Depression, it can be hard to just wake up. I remember I always know when I'm really depressed when I keep saying everything is so hard, because everything becomes hard. Waking up, feeding myself, doing things I normally love, they're all hard. I love exercising, but it can be really hard when you're depressed. And so hopefully you can get to that point that you can exercise, but also it's something you could suggest to someone that you're really close to and you feel it out. But don't be like, well, if you just exercised, you'd get better.
All your problems will go away. Magic wand. No, yeah.
It's a lot more complicated than that.
Yeah.
And then I also think in our culture, when we think exercise, we think going to the gym, going for a run. Like, it has to be really intense, right? But I think exercise can just be going for a walk. It can be fun things. Like, you could going on a hike. I don't know. I like stuff like that. Paddleboarding. Like,
even,
there's...
Oh, go ahead. Oh,
well, there's so many ways to exercise. We don't have to put it into a box of, like, the only valid exercise is one that you're sweating.
Yeah, it's just about movement, exercise and movement. And that alone does so much for your body and your brain and your mental and emotional well-being. And even if it's like, yes, I get a ton of messages, and I feel like that's the most predominant thing in the US right now, of go to the gym and here's how you work out and you're healthy and whatnot. And also exercise or movement could look as simple as loading the dishes.
You're moving.
Or vacuuming. Yeah.
I think cleaning counts as moderate exercise, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
Yeah.
I believe it.
That's right.
Yeah. Pulling up videos of Just Dance and having a fun dance party, like those work too.
Yeah, Just Dance. Zumba.
Yeah.
Have a good time.
Yeah.
And that goes back to the positive emotions, I think, where it's like find exercise that makes you have more positive emotions.
Yeah,
right?
That's fun for you. Like,
then you're just checking off both boxes.
Yeah. And then the two last pieces, we have sleep, which huge.
Yeah.
I am much less of myself when I don't get the sleep that I need. Sleep is huge.
Yeah. I found for me, when I started sleeping more, a lot of my mental problems were just greatly reduced suddenly. It was kind of incredible. I also think we have this attitude of adults need 7 to 9 hours. But we almost don't value sleep in our society. We all know it's important, but we don't value it, right? And so a lot of adults are like, oh, well, if I just sleep 7 hours, then I can get more done the next day. But I think figure out how much sleep your body actually needs. Yeah. I personally thrive on 9 hours of sleep. That's my happy spot. Yeah. And just embrace that you're going to feel better when you get the amount of sleep that you need.
Yeah. I 1000% agree with that. I have found that my ideal for my body, my brain, what I need, it's 9.5 hours of sleep. That is so lovely for me. I don't get 9.5 hours of sleep very often though. Maybe on certain weekends. However, there's a lot of stuff going on in my life, and it comes down to time. So normally I feel like I'm getting anywhere from 6 to 8.5 hours of sleep. I have to be very intentional with it though, and that's the thing, because there are things that can distract me or get in the way of me going to sleep, such as being on my phone or trying to take care of a chore and whatnot. So it's what can I take care of now that will help me get to bed at a good time, so that I will take care of myself and put this deposit, even an investment, into future Brooke. I think that's a big thing that comes down to sleep for me. It's the investment in myself.
I like that. And sometimes you hear people be like, oh, well, I do fine on not really sleeping that much. In one of my lectures, they talked about being sleep deprived makes it so you don't realize that you're not doing as good as you would normally. Basically, you're not aware of how much not sleeping affects you because you're sleep deprived, which I think is kind of ironic.
Well, your brain, your brain just functions differently when you don't get the sleep you need.
Yeah, it does. And then our last one is optimism. We talked a lot about at the beginning, so we won't go on this super long. But I think optimism keeps you with a positive outlook on life, which long term helps your interpretation of events to be happier, to be more positive, and so you get more positive emotions. I just think optimism is so important. As a teenager, when I started being more optimistic about things and having a better attitude, it changed my life, and it makes you more pleasant to be around. So trying to be more optimistic, and this isn't being like, oh, everything's great and perfect all the time, like we talked about with like toxic positivity, but I think just having a positive outlook on life, because there are lots of bad things in the world, but there's so much good at the same time. And there's lots of people that are like, well, being optimistic just isn't a realistic way to see things. Being pessimistic is not either, though. And so I think you can have more balance, right?
And also too, just for a concrete example, optimism is a way that we can find the victories in our day, whether it's a little thing or a big thing, right? So for example, I don't have any kids. Eventually later in my life I'd love to have some. Right now I don't. And one thought is, I can easily see myself slipping into, I didn't get the chores done, the laundry hasn't been folded or put up, or the dishes are still in the sink. And I guarantee that if I can go ahead and step into that space of optimism and say, you know what though, Brooke, look at what you did do. Instead of pointing out all the things that I didn't get to take care of, I still showed up in these ways, and those are pretty amazing. Like if I played with my kids, if I wrestled with my kids, like doing things that could even go back to the rest of the PERMA model of like, yeah, I exercise. Like even though I didn't go to the gym or maybe go on a hike, I wrestled with my kids, jumped with them on the trampoline, and I was also building our relationship and creating positive emotions. Like there are so many ways that you can pursue happiness in your life and be intentional and healthy with it, and also recognize that, yeah, you only have 24 hours in a day, no more, no less. So what are you going to choose to do with your day? Are you going to be intentional?
Yeah. Choose optimism.
Yeah.
So that is the PERMA model.
Wow.
I think this is a very powerful roadmap for living a great life. I think it can be a little bit overwhelming because it's like, I have to do all these things. But just take it one step at a time, and little things, and recognize you're probably already doing a lot of these things, right? So instead of thinking there's all these things I need to add to my life, say, how am I already doing these things, and what's one or two that I could add that you personally feel like would help you a lot, right? Okay, so to review everything that we talked about, just so you can get it all in your mind, our first section was on problematic ways we talk about happiness. We talked about the 3 myths of happiness. Myth number 1, just choose to be happy. Myth number 2, you should be happy all the time. And myth number 3, the happily ever after myth. Think about how those have affected you and how you can have a paradigm shift to have a healthier view about happiness. Then we talked about the words we use to describe happiness and how those can make happiness confusing, and ways we can better describe it so that we can go forward having healthier views on happiness.
Helping us understand it better.
Yeah. And the conclusion we came to in that part is focus on peace of mind, living within your values, instead of happiness, and that'll naturally probably lead to happiness. And live fully. Embrace the full human experience. What a gift.
Yeah, I love that. And then the last section that we just did, and how to pursue happiness in an intentional, healthy way. So we went through the how of happiness, right? So the pie chart that we looked at with how 40% is what we can control with our happiness, and that's intentional activity. And within that intentional activity, we have the PERMA model, where you can go through it all. You can pursue things that create positive emotions for you, that there is engagement, that you're building positive relationships or meaningful relationships and interactions, right? And that you are coming up with finding meaning in your life and what you're doing. And then we also have the plus piece of the PERMA model that includes nutrition, exercise, sleep, and optimism. Ways that we can show up for ourselves and have a big heart and be able to look at the little and the big victories throughout our day, throughout our week, and also in our human journey, right? And I think all of that is pretty exciting to look at and think, yeah, these are things I can do throughout my day, my week, that can facilitate my happiness and help me just have a better understanding and relationship with the pursuit, if you will, of happiness, instead of all the shoulds and the, well, we're going to dismiss the bad or the lows. It's the and piece that's pretty important.
Woo! So that's the end of our conversation on happiness. Happiness has a lot of complexity, and so I'm sure we'll cover aspects of it in future episodes. And a lot of our next episodes are very connected to this episode, so I think it's gonna be nice, hopefully. If you want to support the show, we have a Patreon. We try and make it very applicable, ways that you can apply what we talk about. The link to that is in the show notes, and we also have a Venmo if you just want to say, hey, thanks for helping us. We really appreciate stuff like that, and we'd love to hear from you, things you like, things that you'd like to add to the conversation, all of that. Let us know.
Yeah, we would love to hear from you.
Yeah,
we really would.
So please, if you want to do that, all of those links are going to be in the show notes, and that's it.
Okay,
have a great week. We'll be back in 2 weeks. Every other Tuesday we're going to release an episode.
Okay, well, take care of yourselves and remember to have a big heart for you.
Love that. See you later, dudes.
Adios.